Welcome back to the Manage to Win podcast. I'm your host, David Russell. Today's episode is sponsored by Habitly. Do you know it sometimes drives us nuts, makes us irritated, even angry or frustrated when other people's behaviors don't match our expectations? How do you understand why does that person behave that way? Well, we have courses on Habitly that teach you how to become a behavioral expert or how to understand their motivations, what's driving them. It can bring you to a whole new level of relationship, personally and professionally. Check it out on Habitly, 7 days free. Can't go wrong. Today's episode is with Jeremy Miner. He is of 7th Level. Now, they do sales training, and this is an amazing conversation. Jeremy's super sharp. He walks through some real clear specifics that you can use in your sales process, or even, quite frankly, in how you engage with others. It's an episode you don't want to miss. Let's dive in. Welcome, Jeremy, to the show. Really excited to have you on because you seem to be achieving things that a lot of other people are not achieving in sales. And so if you can let the audience know what you're up to, and then let's dive into your unique approach.
Well, I'm not that cool. But thanks for the compliment. So as far as what we're up to, I mean, it's pretty basic. We're a global sales training company, 7th Level, headquartered here in Scottsdale. And we're a company that trains all the way from Fortune 500, all the way down to SMB, to individual salespeople that really sell anything. In fact, we train in it's actually 158 industries at this point. We looked it up, and Forbes says do you know there's only 158 industries in the world? I literally would have thought there'd been way more, but there's only 158 industries. There's subsets of those, but there's actually only 158 industries.
Wow.
So that's kind of what we're up to, over here, just doing some stuff here and there with companies and clients. So lots of fun over here for sure.
Well, now you've got a unique methodology, NEPQ. What is that?
Well, yes, I would say that for sure. I think it might be better to do this. This might be a better explanation to kind of set everybody to understand kind of where that comes from. So my background in college was behavioral science and human psychology, right? I'm like the science nerd. So I look at like data and stuff like that. Like, why do human beings make decisions one way or the other? And so, if everybody wants to write this down, like if you're driving, don't go crazy here, but if you got a pen and a paper, write this down, because according to behavioral science, and this will lead me into what NEPQ is and how I developed it. But according to behavioral science, there are 3 forms of communication. Okay. And once you understand the differences in persuasion and where you're at right now in your current sales ability, even if you're doing well, compared to where you could be, it'll completely change everything for you. So the first mode of communication, I'm not going to give you the scientific terms, the nerd terms we would use in behavioral science, but I'm going to boil it down where you can see a picture in your mind, okay? So the first mode of communication would be more like boiler room selling. Like, what's the first image that comes into your mind when I say boiler room selling? That's era 1 type of sales, okay? So according to behavioral science, we are the least persuasive when we tell people things, or we attempt to dominate them, or posture them, manipulate them, or push them into doing something that we want them to do. So when you think of boiler room selling, have you ever seen like Wolf on Wall Street, the shows?
No, I haven't. But
You've never seen Wolf on Wall Street?
I don't watch TV.
I don't hardly ever either, but I mean, I think every salesperson listening or entrepreneur has seen that show. So if you've seen any of those type of shows, they get on the phone, it's the boiler room. They're in all these, it's like they're in cages and they're just like, out there, hey, we've got the greatest opportunity for you. We talk about the features, the benefits of what we do, and then we push and we tell them why they really need to buy or why they need to go with you. And it's just like if you tell your spouse that they really, really need to do something for you, and then you keep pushing them, what do they typically do back?
Well, they're either not going to do it or they're going to do it, and we realize that they're doing it, but they're not into it.
Yeah, they push back, right? It's just human behavior. Like if we push human behavior 101, people push back, all right? So I'll give you a few examples of the least persuasive way to sell. Okay, presenting. Typically when I'm at training events, I'm like, hey, the least persuasive way to sell according to behavioral science is presenting. People are like, no, Jeremy, I have to have my 90-minute slide decks. I have to go through, here's our corporate office. Here's all of our awards for the best customer service of the year, the best quality, the best service. We have the best this, the best that, which, by the way, doesn't every single salesperson ever try to sell you something say they have the best product or service? How many salespeople that all of you are listening to me right now, how many salespeople do you know that tell you their product or service? Yeah, we're just, we're the fifth best product in the market. No one does, right? Everybody says that they're the best. And so because of that, your prospects are used to that. So they actually, when we say things like we have the best this, we have the best that, we're the number one rated, we're the number one this, it's just like if you, and I know you don't watch TV, but like my I always had to watch The Bachelor, the show on TV, The Bachelor years ago, right? And so so anyways, a whole nother story, but they would always come on there. The host would be like, this is the most dramatic season ever, the number one. And they'd say that for like 20 seasons straight. So like nobody believes it at that point. All right. So it's just like selling. So people, your prospects, when you say things like that, just so we all understand, they actually trust you less because they hear everybody saying the same thing, especially if you talk down about your competitors. So according to the data, it's not very persuasive if your presentation is more than 10% of your entire sales process. Now, what's the average salesperson do in both B2B sales and B2C sales? They actually present about 50% of the time. We have to lower that down to about 10%, okay? Telling your story. I hate to tell you this. I'm going to rock somebody's world here. Nobody cares about your story when you're selling one-to-one. Whose story do they care about? Their own story, right? That makes sense, right? Given a sales pitch, we've all been told we have to give a great pitch, but according to the science, not very persuasive according to the polls, right? So once again, you never watch any TV. I don't even hardly watch TV. But if anybody on here has ever watched Shark Tank, because that's a show I like to watch. I like to see the entrepreneurs.
I have caught that a few times.
Yeah. Okay. So you have seen something. All right. I didn't know if you just threw TVs away and, turned off your electricity or what happened. But if you watch Shark Tank, you got Damon John, Mark Cuban, Barbara, Mr. Wonderful, everybody that's on there. I want you to watch their body language and their facial expressions when the entrepreneurs come out and they're all excited and they start pitching their products. They're like, whoa, you can see their body language and how they react to that. Okay. And the big one is assuming the sale. According to the data, very low on the persuasion poll, especially if you're in more of a complex selling environment that requires multiple calls and touches. Now that's the first mode. Second mode of communication, not going to give you the scientific term, but everybody would know it more as consultative selling. Okay, that's called era 2 type of sales. So we're more persuasive when we attempt to have a discussion. Okay, consultative selling came out in the 80s, several books, but one in particular was called Spin Selling. The professor called Neil Rackham, where he taught that you needed to ask, lo and behold, logical-based questions to find out the needs of the client. But what's a potential downfall of the approach when you're only asking logical-based questions? We call those surface-level questions. Well, when you ask a surface-level question, your prospects are going to do what? Give you a logical-based surface-level answer in return. And do human beings buy on logic or emotion? We all know
emotion.
Yeah. Brain studies prove that without a shadow of a doubt. There's really no debate on it at this point. So examples of consultative selling questions that a lot of you probably are familiar with, and you guys might be using them is, okay, so John, tell me, what's keeping you awake at night? Or can you tell me 2 problems that you're having the most, Amy? Or who besides you would be involved in the decision? See, these are just surface level consultative questions. So if I want to find a decision maker, instead of saying, who besides you would be involved in the decision, because everybody's used to the same surface level question, I might relanguage it to get them to open up more with something like, Sally, can you walk me through your company's decision-making process when it comes to solving problems like this? See, that's more engaging. That's more getting them to walk me through means they're doing something. So they're more likely to actually, we have to contact Jill and human resources. And then we have to go up to our board of directors, and then it's going to have to go to legal. And so you start getting a snapshot if you're in the B2B selling world. Okay. Now, those are some examples of logical-based questions. Now, but
Jeremy, I got to tell you, just that if somebody asks me what's keeping me up at night, I'm done. I'm gone. I'm done.
Did you know that's one of the most asked sales questions in B2B sales in 2022? And it's been around for 40 plus years. And did you hear what you just said? And that's what triggers that. You know exactly what they're doing. You've heard the same surface level question many, many times. And if you're saying that you are triggered by that, good Lord, how many prospects are they talking to every day that are triggered exactly the same?
Well, and it raises a concern with me when they ask those types of questions that you brought up. They don't really understand my problems. They don't understand my business, and they really don't care. These are, as you said, they're surface level. They're still really about them.
Yeah.
And what they want to get.
Doing when they ask that type of question.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. I mean, what's keeping me up at night? Let me just tell you. I mean, you guys might think that you can ask these surface level questions and then all of a sudden your prospect's just going to lay everything out. And you'll have a few lay down sales that will. But that's like 5% of the people you talk to. I don't care about the 5% that are just going to buy from no matter what. As Brian Tracy says, every blind squirrel eventually finds a nut. I'm talking about the other 90% that are not buying from you, that are running the other way from you. What are you saying and or not asking that's triggering them to throw out sales resistance and try to get rid of you? Okay, so that's the second mode. It's actually more persuasive than boiler room selling. Manipulating, pressuring, but you're still playing the numbers game because you're bringing, like you said, you're bringing very little emotion out of a prospect because there's no reason for them to do that by simply asking logical-based questions. Now, third mode, here's where we're going to talk about NEPQ. Third mode of communication is actually called dialogue, okay? And we are the most persuasive when we allow others to persuade themselves. When we ask what are called neuro-emotional persuasion questioning, okay, that stands for NEPQ, like you asked me, okay? Now, the question always people ask me, okay, Jeremy, that sounds great, but how do I get somebody to persuade themselves? Now, that's like the $1 billion question. You just show up and give the prospect permission. Hey, go ahead, persuade yourself, John, and here's our wire directions. No, of course not, right? So you have to learn specific skilled questions, okay? When and how to ask them in a step-by-step structure that will get your prospects to actually pull you in, okay? Disarm themselves where they actually want to open up and sell themselves rather than you trying to push your way through. See the difference in that?
No, I understand it perfectly because in my leadership consulting, I get asked, Dave, how can I motivate my employees? Yeah. And I learned years ago, I learned from TTI, our assessment company that's in Arizona, close to you, Target Training International.
I'm going to look them up.
They teach that you cannot motivate people. You only can create an environment where they motivate themselves. Well, so that's what I encourage the leaders to do.
Hit it right on the head. It's all, see, there's two different types of persuasion. There's external persuasion and there's internal persuasion. Now, external persuasion is like, I'll just give you an example. Let's say you go to some personal development conference and the speaker's great. And I love Tony. I'm a big fan of like Tony Robbins. I think he's really the best person at even internally motivating somebody to change, because that's where change happens internally, not externally. But most speakers get everybody riled up and excited. It externally motivates them. And then what happens? They get home and it, like in a day or two, it just starts to wear off because they were externally persuaded or excited. That's where buyer's remorse comes in with the prospect, right? So how do we get them internally persuaded, right? That's the key, because if you really think about, I had somebody ask me this at an event a few months ago. They said, Jeremy, if you could describe sales in one word, what would that be? And there was like a 5-second pause because I'm like searching. I'm like, I've never been asked that question. That's what was going on in my mind the first 3 seconds. But I said, if I could describe sales in one word, it's change. All selling is change, if you really thought about it, right? It's about how good you are at getting your prospect to view in their mind. Now, not by telling them they need to change, because that just goes in one ear out the other, right? You're biased. You're the salesperson. You're the company trying to sell them. But it's about getting the prospect to be able to view in their mind that by them changing their situation, now that means paying for your product or service, that by them doing that, that is far less risky for them than them doing nothing at all, staying in the status quo. Their problems stay the same and nothing ever changes. So whether your prospect wants something better than they have, or they're trying to get away from the pain, it's all about one thing, right? It's about change. Now, here's what we all have to understand. If you're an entrepreneur or business owner or salesperson or coach or whoever you are, leader, it doesn't matter. Everybody's in sales at this point. Is that human behavior 101, human beings do not like change, even though they say they do. So here's what I just said. Selling is all about change, but human beings don't like change. Do you see the conflict there? It's all about change, but human beings don't like to change, right? And why is that? Because it makes us feel uncomfortable to change, especially when it's initiated by some pushy salesperson that's ready to pitch their products or services within 15 seconds of meeting a prospect. Because human behavior shows that we value something that is familiar, okay, even though we don't like it that much, over something that is new and unknown to us. Think about the battered spouse syndrome, right? You keep getting verbally abused, physically abused, but what keeps happening? You keep going back because you're familiar with that and you're scared about what is outside of that because it's unknown to you. You see how kind of the brain works?
Oh, so, yeah. And you can see that with almost everybody that's listening right now, who's a leader, who has kept an employee on staff for weeks, months, or even years that they had been misbehaving or poor performing, because kind of like the battered spouse, there's moments when they're okay.
Yeah, we're afraid of the unknown. We don't know what.
But it's just easier.
What's out there? It's easier to live in pain. Like we learn to be, I think you made a great point there. We become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And we settle for that because we don't know what the change on the outside looks at. Like what happens if we let them go and who we're going to bring in? Like, so we always stay in that situation. As a leader, sales professional, leader, business owner, sales executive, who you are, sales manager, we have to be able to make decisive action and be able to, if we want to get to a place where we haven't gone, what we've done up until that point, how can it ever get us to here, right? If you can see my hands, if you're watching maybe on YouTube, okay? So we have to change to be able to get to a higher level of anything that we're doing. And one thing we have to realize is you're in any type of sales environment, or like you said, if you're a leader trying to convince your employees to do something, is you're not selling the thing, you're selling the results of what that thing does. That's a big, sometimes people are like, repeat that. No, you're not selling the thing. Like you're not selling, if you sell life insurance, you're not selling the life insurance policy. You're selling them the results of what that happens when somebody dies and they're financially protected. If you sell cybersecurity to banks, you're not selling them a software, the thing. You're selling them the results of what that thing does, which protects their customers from fraud, right? You're not selling them whatever it is. You're not selling them the thing. You're selling them the results of what that thing does for them. And once we understand that we're selling results instead of the product or service, that opens up a lot of possibilities with our sales teams 100%.
Well, what about this thing where I'm discussing this third level, and I like the term discuss because discuss indicates we're having a back and forth dialogue. Yeah, I don't have 57 questions and I'm just interrogating the person to death.
Yeah, because you're like a telemarketer where you're just asking some questions off a script. People pick up on that, right? It sounds unnatural. It doesn't sound weird. So we have to bridge from question to question. We're having more of a discussion, like you said, a conversation, but it's a skilled conversation, right? Keep going.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding it correctly, it is a conversation where, I'm going to ask some questions, but when I get responses, I'm going to then connect that to
I'm going to clarify and probe off that, right?
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So if I let's say if I start the conversation, and maybe I'll train so many different industries. I'll try to be industry specific to here and there if I can. I'll keep it kind of generic for everybody listening on, because there's probably different industries. But if I started to, let's say it's an inbound lead, for example, instead of using like the upfront contract that a lot of companies have been taught, like at the end of this call, you're going to be able to make an informed decision, whether we're a good fit for you and if you're a good fit for our company. Well, nobody believes that. Like nobody believes that if you hand them a credit card and be like, I want to pay $100,000 to you right now for your services. Nope, you're not a good fit for us. I have to turn it down. Like nobody believes that when you say that kind of stuff. It just, like you said, triggers more resistance, right? So let's say, for example, if I'm selling, business consulting, let's say if I'm a salesperson for a consulting company that brings people in to help, SMB companies really scale their business and operations and sales and marketing, everything, and just help grow your business. I'll give you an example. So when I'm into that conversation, I might come and say, now, the first part of this call, it's pretty basic. It's really more for us to find out kind of more about, what you guys have been doing to really grow it and scale the business, like in the past and right now, compared to where you're wanting it to be, just so we can kind of see what that gap looks like, to make sure we can actually help. Because there's some companies that might not even need us at all. You know what I mean by that? Now, when I say that, because there's some companies that might not even need us. Why? Because a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, you're telling them that they might not even need you? Well, yeah, because what does that do when I say that? It disarms the prospects. It triggers them to let their guard down. Because if I say, because, we're able to help everybody and we know the solution is going to be a really good fit for you, what's that going to do?
Yeah, well, that's going to make me hesitate. But are there times where instead of saying, you used the term that, how did you word it? That we might not be a good fit for you, but I'm wondering the term,
we wouldn't
or that, we do some things really, really well.
Good fit, because every salesperson says that.
Right.
See if we're a good fit for you and you're a good fit for us. Like literally everybody has been saying to see if we're a good fit for 30 years. So when you sound like everybody else, what does the prospect view you as? Just like everybody else. They put you in this bucket as like, oh, just a salesperson trying to sell me something. When we train salespeople and companies to train, we're getting the prospect to, first of all, disarm, like let their guard down. We call that, instead of following the ABCs of closing, because that's been around for like 150 years, like dinosaur ages of selling, we're following the ABDs of selling. Always be disarming. Our questions that we ask in our tonality have to trigger the prospect's brain to what? Let their guard down, to disarm the prospect where they actually want to engage and they want to open up to us because they are open to what we're offering. So when I say, because there's some companies that they might not even need us at all. And when I say that, when I'm unbiased and I admit that we might not be able to help them, people want what they can't have. So it triggers like, oh gosh, I hope they can help me. It triggers the opposite reaction. When I assume and I say, because, I know our solution is going to be the right fit for you. And I do that really like up front in the first 30 seconds. Now, it's different at the end of that sales process. I can be a little bit more assumptive. But if I'm really assumptive up front in the first 30 seconds to a minute, typically, in most people, unless it's a lay down sale, that's going to trigger what you said, resistance, because they're like, you don't even know what my situation is. See what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I love the way you start out, basically where you are today and where you want to be. And then is it weak to then say that, I'd like to kind of walk through it and we'll see, if there's some areas where your needs match what we do well. Is that a weak way to do it? Or is it?
I wouldn't language it that way because I don't like to use the word needs as well. Like I like to, when we train companies, we try to stay away from sales jargon that every company uses, like just so we can see your needs to see if we're a good fit. Because everybody says that. And if we sound like everybody else to the prospect, they view us like everybody else. So how do we stand out? How do we get them to view us? And we might have the same product or service as all of our competitors with a little bit of, everybody thinks they have the best product or service, but in reality, there's some things you might do better and some things that somebody else does better. Let's just be honest with ourselves, right? There might be one standalone that is the best ever, but everybody thinks they are. So what we want to do is, how do we get the prospects to view us and our company as the experts, as the trusted authorities, rather than how they view everybody else as just another salesperson trying to stuff their solution down their throat? And one of the ways we do that is we use neutral languaging, and we get rid of the jargon, the sales lingo that every single salesperson has been saying for the past 100 years. Hey, John, just following up with you. Like the word follow up, we always say, never use the F word in sales. Never say I'm following up or I'm just checking in. You might as well tell that prospect, I'm just calling to get your credit card, or I'm just calling to get you to buy. That's literally how the prospect interprets that. So in your emails, in your calls, and you're calling back a lead again, or a prospect that you might have already talked to and you haven't got a decision, when you say, I'm just following up or I'm just checking in, you literally might as well be saying, I'm just calling to get your credit card, because that's how most prospects interpret that. And why is that? Because every salesperson that's sold them vacuum cleaners, to life insurance, to a car, to financial services, to whatever, says the same wording. You see what I mean? So
what do you say instead?
So I say, I just had time to get back to you. We can relanguage that. I just had time to get back to you. Now, what does that imply? We're busy. We've got lots of other clients. I just had time to get back to you is much more neutral than I'm just checking in or I'm just following up.
Yeah.
See, it's just a slight word change.
And then what about the advice to then, when you come back to them, also trying to avoid that language that you're really coming back to follow up, but instead saying, I saw this and I thought of you, or you give them something of value, or you show them something that relates.
It depends on obviously the individual conversation and the situation. You're going to say different things. What I'm just suggesting is, when you start out the call, you want to avoid sales lingo that every salesperson says that has ever tried to sell them. Because realize, they're not just getting calls by you. They're getting calls by tons of other companies and industries trying to sell them something every day of the week, right? For the most part, especially if you're selling B2B. So let me give you another example of how to reword some other stuff here while we're kind of on the subject, if you want. So let's say that I'll give you an example. Let's say you walk into a boardroom meeting. Let's say you're into some type of B2B sales. And let's say it's your fourth or fifth conversation. You've moved up the chain, C-level executive to this person, to these people. Now you're meeting with the board. And let's say in that board, there's 8 people and you've really only talked to 2 of them. You've got 6 other people sitting there like, who the hell is this person again, right? Another meeting, another vendor trying to pitch us something. So a lot of times you'll find, and I even had this with me, like I sold in 4 different industries in my 17-year sales career. 2 of them were B2B. And some of them were some of our clients were pretty large clients that I was selling to. And sometimes I'd walk into a boardroom and there'd be some guy or gal that would just look up and they'd be like, hey, I know you've got an appointment with us, but let's just be really quick because we already have a vendor that does the same thing. Like, why should we go with you? Have you ever heard that? Like, hey, why should we go with you? We already use somebody for that. Now, what would the typical salesperson say in your mind?
Well, I don't know whether they'd know what to say, because the typical salesperson would be scared at that point because they hit a brick wall.
Well, they're not going to be, most people aren't going to be like a deer light in the headlights. They're going to be like, well, the reason why you should go with this is, and then they're going to rattle off a bunch of reasons why they feel that they're the best, right? We have the best of this. The reason why you should go with this is we have the number 1 customer service. We've been rated AAA rated by the Better Business Bureau. And they're going to go through like a laundry list of reasons why they're better. And pretty much they just get shut down very quickly because they sound like everybody else. So what I want to do, and what we train companies, is we want to disarm the prospect that asks that question. We want to find out why they're even asking that question in the first place. Okay. So what I'm going to say is, then they say, well, hey, we already have a vendor. Why should we go with you? I'm going to sit back and be like, well, I'm not quite sure that you should yet. We'd have to understand, because I haven't met with your team over here. I've just met with John and Amy. We'd have to understand a little bit more about what you guys are using in the XYZ area compared to maybe where you're wanting to be, just to see if we can actually help, because maybe you'd be better off staying with vendor X. Are you with me? Now, when I say, I'm not quite sure that you should yet, and I pause, what do you think goes on in the prospect's mind?
Well, they're either feeling, yeah, I was right. We don't need to go with this person, or they're wondering what makes them think that? Why are they giving?
I'll make a suggestion to you, like just behavioral science 101. What that does is when you admit, when you're unbiased, because you don't know enough details, and we say, well, I'm not quite sure that you should yet. We'd have to understand a little bit more about what you're doing in XYZ and ABC area just to see if we can even help you in the first place, because maybe you're better off staying with vendor X. Are you with me on that? What that does is it triggers them to disarm. It triggers to let their guard down because you don't sound like everybody else. If you sound like everybody else, it's over. You've lost the sale at hello. They hear the same stuff from everybody else. So when I say, I'm not quite sure that you should yet, and I pause, and then I say, we'd have to understand a little bit more about what you're doing in XYZ area, the prospect thinks, oh, that makes sense. They don't even know our situation yet. So I'm admitting until I know more details about their situation, where they're at right now compared to where they want to be, I don't know if we can yet. And when I admit that, that triggers them to let their guard down and become open to my questions that I'm going to ask them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. If I'm understanding correctly, what you're also doing is they're trying to play the game a certain way, and they're trying to be in control.
Yes.
And you're changing the game, but with your disarm tactic.
What I'm doing is I'm raising my status in their mind. Okay. What most salespeople would do, well, the reason why you should go with this is because of X and because of Y and because we have the best this. And all that does, here's the status. Here's the prospect. Here's you. You come in with an even status into that conversation. And as you start talking about all your features and benefits, why you have the best this and best that, in their mind, your status is starting to be lowered. And you look like every other salesperson trying to sell them something. What we're going to teach you how to do is to basically disarm the prospect. Well, I'm not quite sure that you should yet. We'd have to understand a little bit more about what you're doing in XYZ area, really to make sure we could even help you, because maybe you're better off with staying with vendor X. For instance, I'd have to know a little bit about, and my status starts to be raised because a needy salesperson that talks about why they should go with them, a salesperson that doesn't need them, has tons of clients, we're already getting results for all these people, that status is raised. So by the end of that conversation, throughout that conversation, your questioning skills have to build that gap in the prospect's mind from where they are compared to where they want to be. What's the gap? The gap can only be put in their mind by the questioning you're able to ask them to get them to open up. Once they see that they have problems that maybe they didn't think they had, that's when your status is raised. That's when they view you as, this is the expert. This is the trusted authority. This is the company that we're going to pay to get us where we want to be. And they'll gladly pay more money to you and your company if they feel you can get them a better result than somebody else that's cheaper. So it's all about raising your status in their mind. And you can't do that if you can't even disarm them to let their guard down, to open up to you and tell you what their real problems are, the root cause of those problems, and how those problems are affecting them. You with me?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm with you. And my understanding is, too, I'm curious whether you agree, is that ideally you would be able to talk with those two contacts that you know on the board and find out what are the major concerns or objectives of the other board members before you go in.
Yeah, to see if we can actually help you. For example, like I know when we were talking with Amy, you had mentioned that you guys, and see, I'm right into what I call situation questions, because, hey, I might have already got two of the decision makers on board, but I've got 6 other people sitting there in the boardroom that are also going to decide. And if I just go right into a pitch, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be convinced from that. Probably not. So I have to help them see that they have problems that maybe they didn't understand they had. Now, we call that problem finding, okay? All these books behind me on sales talk about how you have to be a great problem solver. And that's true. But if your prospects don't buy from you, you can't really solve any of their problems. You can't be a problem solver if they don't buy. So to get them to buy so you can be a problem solver, you first have to do what? You have to be even better at problem finding. And that means asking the right questions at the right time that allow the prospect to find problems that they didn't even know they had. I mean, we all have to realize, everybody knows this, that's listening. When you first start talking to a prospect, for the most part, most of them don't even know what their real problems are. Or maybe they know they have a problem, but they don't really know how bad the problem really is. Or maybe they don't understand the consequences of what will happen if they don't do anything about solving the problem. Now, once you learn what we call NEPQ, and you can pull that extra information out of them, and they want to give it to you because they have massive trust in you. And that's not talking about how's your day today or how's the weather. That doesn't build trust or rapport. That's just old school. It doesn't work. Okay. But I'm talking about building trust by your skilled questioning that allows them to view you as an expert in what you're talking about. So once you're able to do that, not only are you able to help them find that they have one problem, but now you're able to help them find that they maybe have 2 or 3 or 4 other problems they didn't even realize they had. And when you're able to do that, whereas no other company or salesperson has the skills to do that, how do you think they're going to start viewing you? Your status is way up here. You're the expert. You're the authority. And of course, they're going to buy from you. That's the difference.
So, Jeremy, I feel like we're just starting. I could talk to you like all day because I do a background in sales too. So it's like, it's really great. But I want to flip what you just said as we close here, that I want to challenge the audience that you may have a problem in your business that's related to revenue, that's related to sales, and you may not fully understand that problem.
Sure.
Just like the prospect that you're talking about, Jeremy. And so where would they learn more about the program that you've got going on, books, materials, whatever, so they can consider this advice? Because this has been a great talk.
Yeah, and I appreciate you having it. I mean, we don't have just like one training program. We have like 27 different ones at this time. It all depends on their industry and kind of where they're at, where they're wanting to go. Gap, right? See where their gap's at would depend on where we put them. But I think the easiest place to even learn about us, to see even if it's something that they want to explore, is we'll give them access to one of our free Facebook groups. So they can go to www. And I think you have the link, salesrevolution.pro. So just go to salesrevolution.pro. You're going to find a lot of free resources in there you guys can kind of go through. And right when the person joins, you'll get a message from somebody on my team, and they'll actually message you a free training that everybody gets when they join the Facebook group. We've got about 25,000 people in there. We started that about a year ago. Entrepreneurs, business owners, salespeople. And you'll get a free training called the NEPQ 101 mini course. It's where my CEO, Matt Ryder, breaks down the NEPQ process. And he's going to give you guys some different questions that your salespeople or yourself can use, no matter what you sell, can use in any sales situation you're in, that just those basic questions right there will help you sell more. And we go live in that Facebook group about 2 to 3 times a week with different trainings on subject matters, different Q&As, different interviews, those type of things. So they're welcome to join that Facebook group if they want some free resources that just alone will help them sell more. And if they want, like obviously advanced training from that, because those we just give nibbles in there, they can always message us in those Facebook groups, and a team member will reach out for sure.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Jeremy. I really appreciate it. You gave some great insights.
Well, I appreciate it. Like I said, I was in Newport Beach like a day and a half ago, and it was 70 degrees every day, and landed back here in Scottsdale in our office. It was 116. So my sinuses are all over the place here. I was like, man, I don't know, should I be on the podcast today? I think my head's blowing up, but I appreciate you having me on anyway, for sure.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today. If you like the episode with Jeremy, please subscribe, leave us a comment or a rating. Love to hear from you, but also check out the website that he recommended, which is their Facebook group, salesrevolution.pro. A lot of free stuff on there, cool things where you can learn and grow. I encourage you to check it out. In addition, to our sponsor site, habitly.com, where you can learn great people skills to help you succeed. Anyway, stay tuned in. We got more great guests coming. Love to have you here. Love to have you back. Bye for now.